Hey everybody, welcome back to James Draws Everything, continuing with our Drawing Every Country in the World's Flag series. And today, doing a controversial one. We're going to be going into Southeast Asia, and we're going to be doing Vietnam. All right, so in the United States, if you say Vietnam, you're probably not even talking about the country. You're probably talking about the war. That's kind of how strong the opinions are, on that particular war and U.S. involvement. So yeah, you don't even have to say Vietnam War. If you just say the word Vietnam, it probably means you're talking about the war. But I think Vietnam has a lot more going on than just that. So I'll give you a little bit of a backstory on the country as I draw the flag here. It is a pretty simple flag, yellow star on red. So that obviously that means communism, very similar to like the China flag, the Soviet flag. Vietnam, one of only 4 communist states that still exist in the world. The other 3 being Cuba, China, and Laos. But Vietnam, a little bit different than like kind of orthodox Marxist-Leninism. They have had some economic reforms in recent time, and we'll get to that in a minute. Let's just get this star in here first. So Vietnam, Southeast Asia, it's always kind of been at an important kind of geostrategigical point. There was a lot of history of like Han Chinese rule in that area. I just want to erase these lines, just dry off this marker first. So yeah, they have been at odds with the Chinese at various points in history. China obviously being a much stronger power with a lot more historical strength and geopolitical power. The Li dynasty was the first Viet dynasty to be established in that region. So basically created like kind of like a Vietnamese empire in the 11th to 13th centuries, the Dai Viet. Subsequent centuries, they fought off both Mongolian and Chinese invasions. And then in 1802, Gia Long formed what was basically reunified Vietnam through all the local kingdoms and principalities in the area, which is pretty much the modern border of Vietnam. You can kind of trace back to that. Later on in the 18th century, you have French colonialism. So Vietnam becomes part of French Indochina. And that, of course, leads to some conflicts later on. And then kind of in the height of the Cold War, there is a war between France and Indochina. And in 1954, the Vietnamese leader Ho Chi Minh, his forces succeed in driving the French out. And this is actually kind of a blueprint for what American foreign policy becomes in that part of the world, right? So people kind of don't remember this, but Vietnam really wasn't the most important country in that area in the Cold War until the war popped off, the Vietnamese War. It was actually Laos. If you look at like the Kennedy administration, Laos was far more important, and that was kind of seen as like where stuff was going to pop off, not Vietnam. When the Vietnam War does pop off, that does spill over into Cambodia and Laos, creating a massive, refugee crises in that area. And I don't want to make the focus of this video solely on the Vietnam War. So if you want my opinion on the Vietnam War, and you've been watching my channel for more than a couple minutes, you can probably guess what it would be. So if you just want to pause the video right here and insert your own history of the Vietnam War, I'll let you do that. Okay, and that's my opinion on the Vietnam War. All right, so again, creates a bit of a crisis with its neighbors. And the thing about the Vietnam War too, it's kind of important in China kind of opening up more to the United States, because believe it or not all of the communist powers were aligned. China was at odds with the Soviet Union post Stalin, and China, there was fear of an Indo-Chinese Soviet-backed communist bloc swallowing up China, right? So you had the Soviet Union to the north, and you had Indochina to the south. The Soviets were already making moves on India and Afghanistan as well. So China, obviously they're going to have their own geopolitical interests that are not always aligned with everybody else's. So yeah, it's not that simple. It wasn't, Cold War wasn't always just a united communist bloc versus the first world Western powers. But yeah, say what you will about the Vietnam War. The North Vietnamese were the communist-backed ones, and they eventually overthrew the more Western-friendly Southern Vietnamese and created a communist state of Vietnam that still exists to this day. And yeah, so Vietnam did fall to communism. However, in the late 80s, under the Doi Mai reforms, they instituted a lot of capitalist measures, right? They became much more open to trade and deals with the outside world. So while they're still communist, they're communist as far as their political parties, right? There's only basically one political party, the Communist Party of Vietnam. But all the, socialism in one country and proletariat revolution stuff, that kind of gets pushed to the side. And Vietnam actually developed a middle class, right? So they figured it out, right? Like they figured out that communism did not work. And while they're still technically communist, they operate in much more free market kind of a capitalism than a lot of other countries in the world do. So technically still communist, but you got to put a little asterisk beside that. And Vietnam now, it's known mainly for manufacturing. There's a gigantic manufacturing industry in Vietnam. So almost everything you get in the United States, it's either made in China or Vietnam, and I think there's a lot of problems with that. But yeah, so let's get to the flag. You know what this means, basically. So the red, the blood of communist revolution, star has 5 points. So the 5 points represent the peasants, the workers, the intellectuals, the traders, and the soldiers that unite to build socialism. All right, so socialism kind of just exists on paper there, but again, they're very much more of a free market economy now. And I think a big problem with Vietnamese manufacturing, and you can say what you will about China, and I think there's big problems with basically, we kind of saw this during the, I don't even know if I can say this word without getting my channel in trouble, the disease of 2020. We kind of figured out how much stuff is not being made here, right? And that kind of put our supply chains and whatnot in trouble. And say what you will about the Chinese, but the Chinese seem to kind of have manufacturing down. You obviously get a lot of shoddy merchandise from China, but I found that stuff from Vietnam tends to be much worse off than Chinese manufactured goods. So in my bonus content here, I'm actually drawing this off camera, at least I think I am. Yeah, the Vietnamese stuff tends to be much more shoddy than the Chinese merchandise. So I want to draw, what would the Vietnamese flag look like if it was manufactured in Vietnam? Right. And I do have a bit of a printing background. I did work in printing briefly, like large-scale commercial printing, so I know the kind of things that can go wrong when you're doing commercial printing. And yeah, we might explore that a little bit in our Vietnamese flag here. Okay, so if you had a Vietnamese flag that was actually printed in Vietnam, it might end up looking something like this. And unfortunately, again, because the quality control standards aren't as high there, you know, and say what you will about the Chinese, I would rather have stuff made in China, but of course I would much rather have stuff made in America in general. So as you can see here, something happened where they didn't center the printing, the, what do you call it, the blade correctly. It's all off center, but yeah, that might be what a Vietnamese flag looks like if you printed it in Vietnam. So I don't know, maybe all this stuff, even though it didn't pass QC, sometimes it still finds its way out to the United States. You know, kind of like you know, when they print off all the football championship stuff, like the Super Bowl stuff, that you know, because they obviously have everything ready to go when the game is over. So they print jerseys or shirts or whatever for both teams, and you know, all those Buffalo Bills Super Bowl champions shirts end up going to like Africa or something because nobody's wearing them here. So are these printing error Vietnam flags kind of like the same thing, right? It's like, what do you do with all this stuff that just obviously didn't pass quality control? But yeah, so pissing off both Bills fans and the Vietnamese here, but that's what I do. So Vietnamese manufacturing, that's what the flag is actually supposed to look like, and this is what it looks like if it's printed in Vietnam. So let me know what you think. Like, comment, and subscribe, and I will catch you on the next video.